espérons qu'un jour, une force mécanique supérieure nous permettra d'avoir la victoire et de délivrer la patrie.
Okay, hi guys, and welcome to the show. Today, something very special indeed, because as you guys know, every month I try and introduce a model of watch or a brand I haven't covered before, but today it's not only those two things, but also a country of origin I have never shared on the channel before. This little French diver is just new on the market, and it's got quite an interesting story behind it. And before I get into it, I'll do my wristwatch check. I'm wearing my beloved Navi timer, as I talked about it last week. I had to get it out of the safe. It has to be slightly oversized, and those of you familiar with its history will know precisely why. Anyway, I'm not going to talk about the Navi timer. Let's start off with a bit of history on the brand La Forban. La Forban Sécurité Mer was a renowned and revered maker of military-grade wristwatches, specially created for divers, maritime pilots, and the crews of the French Navy during the 1960s and 70s. Today, we see the once iconic brand revived under the new leadership of Jean-Sébastien Coste, and I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Please forgive me if I'm not. He happens to be the owner of Triton, and for those not familiar, they are another French watchmaker who also have a long, illustrious history of making some highly engineered, hardcore diving watches during the 60s. Both brands are mentioned in the watch history book about the Marine Nationale, amongst the more famed brands like Tudor, Breguet, Doxa, and so on. Incidentally, Triton was also specially manufactured and supplied to the French army as well. And a little extra bit of trivia is that astonishingly back then, they were priced higher than the Rolex Submariner at retail. So fast forward 50 years and the name Forban Sécurité Mer returns in the form of their first release. This is the Malouine. And the Malouine, in case you're wondering about the meaning, a Malouine is the person who comes from the walled port of Saint-Malo, which is a historic French port in Brittany on the Channel coast. I've actually had the pleasure of visiting it during my many travels in France as a teen, and it is a very impressive place indeed. The legendary port of Saint-Malo was often frequented by corsairs, privateers, and Forban. They are a kind of pirate, if you will. This is where the brand itself derives its name from. These French pirates were famous the world over for their daring adventures and exploits. Now I'm going to interrupt here because I want to announce a very generous offer for the gentry, the good gentry out there from Watchbox. We all work hard for our money, so when it comes time to spend it on a luxury watch, the best way to take your money furthest is to buy pre-owned. With some dealers, this might be risky, but not at Watchbox. As a former customer, it was only natural I became part of the Watchbox family. I fell in love with the easy, safe, and professional manner in which they do business. So why are they so highly regarded? Authenticity is always guaranteed. Every watch comes with a 2-year warranty, and Watchbox has their own in-house Swiss-trained expert watchmakers. They have a global presence and an unrivaled selection. It's simply the best way to buy, sell, and trade your watches from the comfort of your own home, anywhere around the world, with a team comprised of passionate watch enthusiasts. As an Urban Gentry viewer, you can also benefit from this wonderful partnership with Watchbox. They are generously offering all Gentry members and viewers exclusive discounts on their next purchase. Please check the description below for the promo code to enter on their website. Watchbox is not just the best option to consider, it's the future of buying and selling watches online. So now we come to the watch itself, and as you can see, its design is very much inspired by its ancestors, even down to the tropic style strap it comes with. These straps are massively popular in the 60s and completes the vintage vibe perfectly. Now, normally I don't talk about a watch's packaging, but I have to say this comes in a very charming French flag themed reusable pouch that is actually quite useful to store watches in and takes up minimal space. I really like this kind of attention to detail. So the case of the watch is entirely in stainless steel, mainly in a high polish, until of course we get to the case back, but I'll return to that in a moment as it's incredibly richly detailed. The curved lugs point slightly downwards, confidently, but not overextending from the main body there, and leave a good space for the movement of the strap. In terms of scale, let's just get the dimensions out of the way. It is very mid-century in its size. The diameter is 38.5 at its widest. The height is a rather statuesque 12.7 millimeters tall, and then we have a lug to lug of just a smidgen under 45 millimeters. The lug width is a strap friendly 20 millimeters. The scale, it has to be said, is very proportional. I think works wonderfully here. Around the very pronounced boxed sapphire domed glass there is quite a slender little aluminium insert for the bezel. The bezel is 120 click unidirectional, and as you can hear, it is ratcheted very securely. A little bit of play, but not too much. The sound, has to be said, is a little tinny, but of course it's not how it sounds, it's how it performs. It does line up perfectly there though. To the right we have angular style crown guards with a screw down crown, a very nicely etched little anchor logo there. Talking of screw down crown, as indicated on the dial, it is 150 meters water resistant. Now, if we look very close up at the bezel there, you can see a slight curvature, slightly reminiscent of the old Bakelite's bezels of the vintage era. It's in a matte finish, and despite its small scale, is legible. The dial is very much inspired by a Forban watch from 1972, as is the extremely distinctive handset there, whereas the coin edge bezel is more like their very first watch from 1969. That was the reference 114 and 201. Then we see the aluminium insert markings as a bit like their very last automatic divers from the late 1970s, I would say. So it really is an amalgamation of the glory days without straying too far, in quite a conservative style, rather restrained, but they're playing in safe waters here. I think it being their first watch to resurrect the brand from the depths of the ocean, so to speak, I think it's a wise move. You don't want to go too crazy here. The style of the numerals at the 12, 9 and 6 are very kind of sci-fi-esque, extremely 60s and retro. So in between the numerals we have modest stick markers for the hours, and the 3 is naturally missing to make way for that framed date aperture. The luminescence is Superluminova C3 that glows a nice bright neon green. This is then crisp white in normal light, and it works very effectively, giving clear orientation thanks to those numerals, and all hands are treated too. With the lume and the clearly defined varying hand shapes, they are extremely easy to distinguish in any light, the most important being the minute hand with an exaggerated arrow tip, along with the paddle seconds hand there, so you can easily use it for timing purposes no matter how dark it gets. We also see a little lume pip at the 0 of the bezel for added timing clarity. The matte of the dial itself veers to extremely dark iron grey at times. It's worthy to note that the watch also comes in a blue sunburst configuration. I almost wish I had that one, as it does look absolutely stunning. The gently sloping and curvaceous nature of that glass there gives very pleasing distortions to those numerals at the periphery of the dial there. And sometimes, as you can see, it has very much a blue hue, so I'm presuming it has anti-reflective coating. Now if we look at the center of the watch, we see a high polished ring. This adds a little bit of elegance to the proceedings and clearly implies that the watch is not only here to serve as a tool, but something a little bit more refined in feeling. Then we get a little splash of color underlining the Malouine name in the form of the French flag. Love this touch, and just reminds you of the heritage of the brand. And that is at the 6 o'clock, or just above the 6 o'clock. At the 12 we see the brand anchor logo in a very 60s-esque style of lettering, which I think works very well, brings a bit of that nostalgic identity. Sometimes I think we forget how a brand's logo can often make or break a watch's design. And talking of refinement, perhaps my favorite feature is that insanely detailed case back. It's just utterly beguiling. Here we see a deeply engraved diver's helmet, complete with rivets and waves in a splendid blasted finish. It exquisitely finalizes the maritime theme with panache and a bit of splendor. It's one of the most impressive casebacks I've seen in a very, very long time. So inside we have the tried and tested Japanese Miyota 8215. This is a 21 jewel automatic movement with 40 hours power reserve, unidirectional winding, parashock protection, quick set, manual wind, and operates at 21,600 vibrations an hour. It was first introduced in 1977, and it has become one of the most reliable options for microbrands. While far from pretty, it has become the very definition of that overused cliche you hear all the time in watch circles of being a workhorse movement. Out of the factory, Miyota claims that it has an accuracy rating of about minus 20 to plus 40 seconds a day, but don't worry, I can happily report it's actually closer to about plus 6. So reliable, easy and affordable to repair. You can quickly see why so many brands have become reliant on this particular caliber. Now the watch comes on this specially made silicone rubber strap. The quality is absolutely outstanding. It's very soft, supple. The only downside is it does attract lint, especially from my gloves. So probably not the best way to review it, but as you can see, if I go really close, it has a lovely cross-hatch pattern that gives almost the impression of it being a smarter leather racing strap, along with the perforations, of course. On the underside, it has a wave kind of pattern there for extra grip, and the resulting feel on the wrist is extremely comfortable. It only weighs about 70 grams, which is quite light indeed. The perforations, which you can see there, also double actually as the holes for the tongue of the signed buckle, which is clever because you can get pretty much any desired fit, no matter how small or how big your wrist is. And talking of the buckle, we should really address the negatives. There are unfortunately a few with this watch. First being the buckle itself. It doesn't really match the style of the watch, slightly undermines its whole kind of classy style. I've seen these buckles, they're just the generic buckle you get on most straps. Not the end of the world. However, the biggest negative to me is the lack of hacking in the movement, especially for a watch based on watches that were issued to the military. It's a real shame. We sometimes forget how lives depended on this feature, especially in a military context, to coordinate operations, of course. But for civilian use, to synchronize to a reference time, it is extremely useful. Personally, I would have preferred the Miyota caliber 9039, and it's a great movement with hacking. I also feel The crown is undersized. I think it's too small. Can't really get grip on it as easily. And sometimes it is difficult to thread. I wish they would have used one like the oversized crowns of their watches of the 1970s. In conclusion, while far from perfect, it's a solid return of a promising and prestigious brand. I got to say, it is good value and well made. Although I'm sure there will be the inevitable comments, there always is, especially with dealing with micro brands, of how much better Seiko divers are for the same price. Well, we must remember how unfair that is. A bit like David with the slingshot and Goliath in an Iron Man suit. It's tough for smaller brands to compete. The advantage is that you're getting something with a bit more personality, a bit more unique, certainly with a ton of charm and character. I gotta say, this is gonna be a strap monster. It's such a handsome piece. It could work very well dressed up, dressed down, on a strap, on a NATO, or if you want to go with something more historically accurate, an NDC, the only genuine maker of the military used Marine Nationale parachute strap. I think that would work as well with this. Really excited to see where this brand goes next. So there you have it, a stylish piece unequivocally, very much evokes that mid-century classicism masterfully. Can I recommend it despite its quite numerous negatives? Yes, I can. I still think it's tastefully done, but certainly more for the smaller wristed, not the larger wristed. I have a 6 1/4 inch wrist, wears perfectly for me, so do take that into consideration. What else can I say? I think that's about it. But anyway, guys, do like this video if you want me to cover more watches in this price range. It really does help me gauge if you're interested in this or not. But yeah, there you go. Anyway, guys, let me know your thoughts, queries, comments, opinions, all the rest of it down below. Thank you so much for watching. Please don't forget to like this video if you enjoyed it and found it useful. And as always, I will catch you in the next one. Okay, ciao.